Welcome to Guys That Listen. I'm Peter, and today we got special guest Tony on the pod. Yo.
How you guys living? My name's Tony from Hidden, and I'm on the pod.
Yo,
Yeah.
dude. Hey, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
All right, so, I said my name is Tony. I run Hidden. We're a designer / streetwear fashion showroom based out in Costa Mesa, California. And yeah, I've been working in the fashion scene for as long as I can remember, working in showrooms in Los Angeles, and prior to that, just flipping, reselling clothes on like Craigslist before there was Grailed.
Wow, Craigslist.
During COVID, I did work at Grailed for a bit, and yeah, I've been anchored down out here in Orange County for the past few years, and here we are.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I've been talking to you for the past couple weeks. We've reconnected. We've been friends for a bit, but it's like I haven't seen him, since prior to the pandemic.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. And it's funny how we ran into each other. Tony hosts this weekly Smash tournament. I just happened to drop by, and I was like, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm the host. I'm like, oh, shit.
Dude, I don't know if they know about your skill. Peter has a nasty cloud.
I'm not that
It
good,
is a
dude.
very nasty cloud.
Please, dude. Now I'm going to have all these people coming at me for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I could take on your cloud. No, you can't. You think you can, but you can't. Oh, my God.
Oh, dude. So there's one thing I want to talk about when it comes to that. And,
All right.
this is for the gamer, nerdier people, right? Is that us getting together once a week just to play for a couple hours is such a great way to decompress and still socialize. And I think that prior to, let's say, 10 years ago, it was very frowned upon, It's like, oh, what are these guys doing? Like, at their age going out and playing video games. And it's like, dude, it's just one way for us to get together and decompress where it doesn't require a whole lot, and it recharges us.
Yeah, and it's nice because it's in such a random day in the week. Like, it's on a Tuesday. For you, those guys that are listening, we host local friends and family Smash tournaments on a Tuesday in the office, right? Later in the evening. And you're right, it is a great way to decompress, look forward to the rest of the week. And I think it really does allow an opportunity for all of us to just kind of be our inner child. Because, like, all of us in that room, we grew up playing video games. I mean, we play Smash as grown adults.
Yeah, and it's nice because, as we get older, right, there's, people say it's harder to make friends, right? I think maybe that is the case, but also I believe the opportunities to make friends are lower, right? Because now you spend a lot of time at work, less activities. When you go out, it's like, if you're out partying, it's not really the most optimal place to be like, hey, what's up, bro? Like, how you been? Like, how's life? Let's catch up over all the loud music. So to have things in common where you guys get together and be like, hey, how you been? And like, we catch up now basically weekly, it's super nice. And I think about that. And that's the way I think about those weeklies that you host. It's just a way to get everyone together and have like a common interest where we could just chill, and outside of the games, we could still just like talk and catch up.
Just be human. Yeah.
Yes, just be human,
That's great.
Yep. And I think I can't think of too many other things that people do where it allows that, because there's things where it's a huge time suck where, it takes up your whole day or something, which not everyone can commit to. I know one of the things that people are doing now that's kind of similar is golfing.
Dude, it's so funny that you bring that up. Like, I actually kind of want to learn. So on this week on Thursday, one of my good friends, David, he lives out in Hawaii. I'll never forget, like a few months back, I was out there for a buddy's wedding. And then I was like, oh, I'm in town. Let me catch up with Dave. And he took me to his apartment, got a new apartment out there. And as I walk in, I see he has like his little putting set up, right? I'm like, dude, what's this? He's like showing me all of his gear, talking to me about golf, because I'm very ignorant about everything. Growing up, I always thought golf was like an old dude sport.
Yeah.
But it's getting super hip and trendy now. He showed me all these YouTube videos about dudes who travel the world to go to these beautiful golf courses. It's almost like a nature, like serene visual overload. I'm like, what? And then he's like, Tony, why don't you try putting? Right? And he's like showing me technique and form. And I got in his apartment at like, I think it was 1 p.m. Next, like, I'm not even paying attention to the time. It's like, oh shit, the sun just set. I'm still putting, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, and I think people need that. I think guys especially need that.
Dude.
I think to have something that makes your eyes light up, like if you're a kid, that's so important to have. Like, and not just guys, obviously, right? But I think definitely as males, we tend to find less ways to decompress. And it's almost like we shouldn't, right? We should add on more stress, more stress, more
Yeah,
stress.
I'd like to add. I don't think it's that men in general, at least in America, find less ways to decompress. I just think that there's so many unhealthy ways to decompress that a lot of people find themselves falling victim to, right? Whether it's partying too much, doing too many drugs, so far so forth, as a means to escape,
Yeah.
as opposed to more wholesome things like playing video games with your friends,
Yeah.
going on a nice walk, or just sometimes for some folks just doing absolutely nothing. Right?
Yeah. To kind of touch base on that, I think maybe it's the way we're using the word decompress, because I do believe that, I go out and party, I mean, I used to host parties. And the thing about that is when not done correctly, it's not really decompressing, right? And you use the word escape.
Yeah.
I think that's what it really is, right?
Yeah.
And people tend to kind of cope and be avoidant of their issues, and they put it on the back burner by escaping through, whether it's alcohol or substance abuse.
I never really thought about how there's a very nuanced, very thin line that separates decompression versus escapism, right? I never really thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think going back to it is like, why are we not pitched these things more? And it's for some reason it's come due to other circumstances, right? So for instance, golf's been around forever.
Yeah.
Right. It's nothing new, but it is very new to a lot of people. I would say in the past 4 years, there have been probably the biggest influx of golfers than ever.
Absolutely. I think it's just what we were marketed to as children, right? Versus now as adults. Like as adults now I'm seeing a lot more younger people, my friends even getting into it, which I think passively influences me to at least want to try it. Compared to when I was younger, I was like, I've never seen a young dude golf or someone in my friend group golf. So then it's like, oh, why should I care? Right?
I think it's also because it's a way to get together your friends in a small group, right? Where you can spend a significant amount of time where people won't frown at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think within the time of the pandemic to now, people have been looking for ways to connect.
Yes.
And that's one of the easiest ways to connect is like, hey, why don't we just go hit some balls,
Yeah.
And it's just like the 3 or 4 of us, and we get chill for like 3-4 hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for me, like looking at it now, I think stress levels and the way people put pressure on us is like at an all-time high. I think also maybe at an unreasonable amount. And kind of wanted to go into this, which is the idea of what people expect out of relationships.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how true this is in general. This is just made due to my algorithm. But, I see a lot of videos of talking about heterosexual relationships, like women's expectations of what they want out of their male partner. Right? How much money they gotta make?
Yeah.
How they look, their fitness. What car they drive, things like that. And I don't really have too many friends or women friends that are like that. They're usually pretty reasonable about these things.
Yeah.
And I've seen it where they put in the calculator, like the likeliness that you'll find this person. Right? They'll enter in like height, and it'll be like, okay, now it's only like 10% or something like that. And then they'll enter like age, and then they'll enter salary, and then it's like 0.001%. It's like, it's unrealistic. Where are you going to find this person, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, in order for us to want or be someone that's desirable, we got to fulfill all these needs. Like we got to check off all these boxes. And that, I feel like, is very unhealthy.
Absolutely. I think people nowadays, as we live in digital age, we see all these things. We have an idea of the person we want to be with, right? We love the idea of this relationship as opposed to, what a healthy relationship actually entails, right? I think for me, so I'm very much, I don't think that everyone has like a perfect one. I'm more so in line with the train of thinking that in your life, you will meet someone more likely than not who can handle your bullshit and vice versa. And then there's a happy coexistence. And you got, it's about being able to handle each other's faults as well as celebrate what isn't at fault, or like the things you have in common and things that
Mm.
you like to be happy about, right?
Yeah. Was that something that you came to terms with recently, or was that your mindset the entire way through?
I think post college,
Post college.
particularly the COVID years, man. I was in a pretty long term relationship during COVID. It ended a little bit after COVID ended. But during that time, more than anything, it was also a long distance relationship, I must add.
Mm.
Gave me a lot of time to self reflect and to think about, like, okay, what makes someone a perfect partner? And it's like, I don't think that I don't think in reality that exists. All right. If I'm being realistic, I believe it's much more important to just really evaluate, like, when you're looking at your significant other, or even just your relationships in general. Like, okay, what to you makes it healthy?
Mm.
Do you, for your relationships, you guys satisfy each other's needs, so far, so forth? Like, what are some red flags on their end that you can or cannot deal with? And what are some things that you feel like you exude that might be a red flag to them? And can they deal with that long term, right? Because
Mm.
everyone's different, right? And
Yeah.
everyone's idea of perfection is also different.
Mm. So why do you said you were in a relationship, long term, long distance, and you had a lot of time to reflect, and that changed
Yeah.
your mind about finding the perfect person.
Mm.
So prior to that, what was your mindset as far as it coming to the perfect person?
I don't really think I had too much of an idea. I was so
Mm.
yeah. I was just for me. I think I was just young, wanted to explore relationships, see what it's like. Right. Um, I've always been marketed the idea of the one. I was like, oh,
Mm.
is my girlfriend at the time the one? I don't know. What makes someone the one? Right.
Yeah.
Just a lot of I don't knows because I at that point I was like the relationship started when I think I wasn't even 20 yet. Right. So I'm just
Wow.
still young adult, fresh in the head, very clueless about where I stand, even my relationship with myself at the time, right?
Mm.
So I'm just like, okay, I'm just hopping to a relationship. What seems right? Let's see how this goes.
Interesting. So that ended, and was that when you had that shift in mindset, or was it
Yeah,
happening during?
that's when I started really thinking. I was like, okay, maybe the one isn't necessarily just like, oh, a magical being, like this mythical idea, but again,
Mm.
telling my logical side to, let's be realistic and see what the one really entails for myself. It's like, and for me, that meant someone whose bullshit I could put up with and someone who could put up with mine.
Mm. Oh wow, that's a very interesting take.
It's my take, brother. It's
Yeah,
my take.
of course, and I'm not here to argue
Yeah.
with that at all.
No, for
And
sure, for sure.
I think there's a lot of points that you're saying that I can relate to, because
Mhm.
I do feel like for someone to be with me, they would have to deal with my bullshit too, which is a
Mhm.
lot, And I think to just expand on how I feel about that
Mhm.
is that beyond just dealing with my bullshit, they would have to want me there.
Mhm.
I think for me, I've been in relationships where I felt like I merely just existed in it.
Mhm.
You know,
Absolutely.
whether it was me or someone else, there would have been something in that relationship. And
Yeah.
when I felt like it didn't need to be me, that's when I left it alone. When I was like, you know what?
I feel you there.
I don't play really a role here. I'm
Mhm.
kind of just a placeholder, right? And I'm a guy who doesn't believe that anything really lasts.
Mhm.
Not in a cynical way, right?
Yeah.
In a way where I think because everything is temporary, everything holds value, right? So if
Mhm.
I choose to spend time with someone that I know it's never gonna be forever,
Mhm.
then I value their time, because we're not gonna be here forever, right? And if they choose to be with me, like, I need to feel like I'm doing right by them,
Yeah.
right? So I talk about this where I've been in a 10-year relationship,
Yeah.
and I couldn't let go for the longest time. This was such a rocky relationship from year pretty much like 3 or 4 onwards
Mhm.
to almost 10.
Yeah.
And I couldn't let go. Whenever we broke up, I would come right back.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, it was something about it that I just felt like I probably didn't want to fail,
Mhm.
right? I felt like I put so much time into it, and there's also the idea that, like, you've been together for so long that you should stay together,
Yeah, dude. No, I feel that. It's even relationships, like this, it's It's like it's a sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
You feel failure, and you also feel like, oh, I invested so much resources into this relationship. Oh, like I can't let it fail. It's like a plant in
Yeah.
a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then some things, and I feel you. Some things just weren't meant to be, and I really like that take you said about like what you told me about valuing their time and leaving that relationship alone. To me, the message that translated was, sometimes to be selfless, you must be selfish, right? Where you got to detach yourself from this, but it's not just for yourself. It's like, okay, because you care about them too,
Yeah.
because they may also latch on, and sometimes it takes being the bigger person to clearly cut the ties. But that's the hard part.
It's so hard.
Even at this day and age, my old head, that's probably one of my biggest difficulties. It's cleanly severing ties.
Yeah, I think when we feel so connected to so many people, because you obviously have a lot of people in your life, I do too, that you want to do right by them, and I think sometimes when, again, both of us, people having to deal with our shit, it's sometimes not right by them, right? Yeah. So in the situation where I was taking a look at it, because I was the person always pulling her back in, right?
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
So I was always the person pulling her back in. Like, she would want to break up, and I would give her 10 reasons not to. Right? So if it weren't for me, the relationship probably would have ended a lot earlier. Right? So the only reason why it was even extended that long was due to my selfish reasons of not wanting to fail. Like, not even thinking if I was being a good partner.
Do you feel like you were also like scared of the idea of just being alone and by yourself?
You know what? So that was my second ever relationship. But when I was young, all the way until I was like 17, I had no interest in dating, like, whatsoever. Yeah. I had this weird, I think I was a little jaded by my friends who like got girlfriends and they would just dip, and I'm like, you know what, like, I'm gonna go skateboarding by myself, I'm gonna go play games by myself, like, whatever. You guys hang out with your fucking girlfriends or whatever. So I was like, I don't want to be one of those guys, right? So by the time that I decided to date, like, I never thought about my companion as a person to fill up the void of loneliness. Right? It was a person that I felt like I wanted to have some sort of a life together. And I don't mean it in a way where it's like marriage or long term. It was like in a way that I want to experience things together with someone else and have memories, right?
I see.
So I don't believe so if I were to really look and think back on it now, because after we had finally broken up and it was like the final time, I chose to be alone for like a year and a half, 2 years. Good. Yeah, I took time off for myself.
That's really healthy.
Yeah, and this is like without seeking someone else during the meantime, like being single as a choice versus like, like I can't find someone. Yeah. But and again, this, I recently got, not recently, sorry, I got out of a relationship that was a almost 4-year relationship, and now I've been single for 3 years. I've really taken time to myself. Yeah. And if anything, I think it was more of the fact that I saw my parents get divorced, and in a relationship that I didn't view as flawed when I was a kid, because to me, I felt like love took precedence over every flaw. That's what I believed when I was a child. So I felt like even though they loved each other very much, that they could make it work. I was like, wow, I want to prove that wrong. Like, I believe love does take precedence over everything, and you can still make it work regardless of your flaws. I've come to then learn that that's not the case. It's a harsh reality.
So hard, man.
Yeah, it's really hard, dude. So, I mean, I don't know how you've handled that, because you asked me if it was because I was in fear of being alone or being lonely. Do you feel like that was the case in your relationship? When
I was in a relationship prior to my current partner, that ended in it was the worst ending possible to relationship. It was also LDR. It was one day straight ghosted. I got a breakup text of all things, ghosted, blocked, and everything. I'm like, damn. And then it's not having that closure at that moment. My head was going, I was spiraling, dude. I was like, dude, I just want to, like, one last word. And then I was like, dang. And also used to just having that companionship, right? At that moment, I feel like my relationship with myself wasn't super developed. So then I was just like, man, I'm so scared of being by myself right now.
Oh, wow.
I confided, I talked to all my friends, which helped. But then I think the ultimate lesson I learned was to just take some time and be by myself and be comfortable in the idea of being by myself. Because then I could take on any battle in stride, right? That's also when I really started learning about the idea of like in therapy, like the idea of your younger self, and like it might sound crazy, but like just talking to yourself sometimes and checking in with like, oh, hey, little Tony, like how you doing? Right. Well, actually, one of my mentor figures in college put me onto that idea, but then at that point is when I really started to resonate with it. Yeah.
It clicked.
Yeah. Shout out Walter from Cabal Crafted. He really was the figure that, as a man, taught me that it's okay to have feelings, be emotional, to cry, to talk your shit, and just be yourself. I think meeting him in college is very important for my personal development, and then like later on in life, when that terrible relationship ended awfully, I was able to take a lot of his guidance and then apply it in that time, and then become more in tune with like me and myself.
Okay, so I want to kind of touch base on that a little bit more, because I think that sounds very helpful. So what did your mentor teach you, or what was the process that you had to go through?
It was less like, oh, hey, Tony, I'm going to tell you about the idea of like, talking to yourself. But it was more of, hey, Tony, so like, I'm going through therapy right now, and my therapist told me about this, and this is what I'm doing for myself right now. And I'm like, okay, cool. I took mental notes, but I didn't exactly put into practice. It wasn't applied because I didn't feel like I needed to, all right? Until, well, I needed to. And I was like, wow, this actually helps a lot. I didn't know how uncomfortable I was with the idea of being by myself. Specifically at that point when I was, really uncomfortable by being by myself. Like, yeah, that was a really big turning point for me.
So how did you identify that you were uncomfortable with being by yourself?
I was just so sad. I was just like, when a relationship was over, I'm just like, I took like a week and just like stayed indoors. I didn't do anything. Didn't really want to talk to anybody. Couldn't be productive. And I was just like, man, I need to talk to someone right now. I wish I had my significant other or my ex. I was like, and then it clicked. I was like, wait, why? I started asking myself questions like, why am I so scared of this concept of loneliness? Or maybe it's because I've built up a preconception that being alone was bad for whatever reason. But then, over time, I actually got really comfortable. It started with small things, like doing things by myself, going to the movies by myself, taking myself out to eat, taking care of myself, being more proactive, so far, so forth. And then it was like a positive feedback loop, right? Doing things that makes you feel fulfilled and happy, and then just keeping it going. I think the biggest thing was just being committed to the idea of wanting to work on myself, wanting to be in a better headspace, actively wanting and then acting on that want to get to where I was like, okay, you know what, I think I'm good now.
That's awesome, dude. For me, this is something that I started thinking about a little bit more, and I don't know if I could vocalize it in the best way, but I've found so one of the biggest things in life, I believe people want to be as happy. And I'm starting to think, and this is just my personal opinion, that we're kind of focusing on the wrong thing a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep on going. What do you think?
Well, I recently started thinking about the word joy, right?
Yeah.
And being joyful and enjoying things, and why that word is not used as much as happy, and then I start thinking, like, what is the difference between the two?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not no expert in this, but I believe happiness is more of a end goal, right? Like I'll be happy once I lose this 10 pounds. You know what I mean? I'll be happy once I get this car. I'll be happy once I make this amount of money. I'll be happy once I'm married, once I'm a father, things like that, right? It's like at the very end of where you're trying to go. And I think joy is something that is very much in the moment. You feel joyous when you're doing certain things. And I think in a lot of ways, joy relates more to fulfillment than happiness relates to fulfillment. And when you're full of joy, you hear that a lot. It's like, it's this thing that you feel like you could replicate because there is meaning and purpose to your life and what you're doing, so I've been really trying to figure out what that is, because I feel like happiness to me is a great thing, right? No one's ever mad at being happy, right? Or they shouldn't be. But it's also very fleeting. It comes, let's say you do get first place in that marathon. You're happy, right? And then days go by and then it's on to the next thing. And then you forget that that's, something that you've worked so long after. And I think joy is the middle piece to all that. It's like, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds and then I'll be happy. But if you just enjoyed, working out, like that workout that you do, right? And then getting to that end goal, that whole chunk of it from the beginning of the journey to the end is now amazing.
I think what you say really resonates with a perspective that I have is that being able to enjoy the journey much more than the destination, right? There's a cliche quote that goes, it's like, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? Obviously, I get it. It's very overused, but I believe the message is so important to reflect and really try to find what you love about the things that you do, whether it's work, whether it's working out, whether it's going out, just about everything, right? Seeing and finding something to appreciate and be grateful for steps A to Y before just looking at Z. I was like, oh, that's where it gotta be to be happy. No, it's like you could be happy right now. It's definitely a big perspective thing that I think a lot of people lose track of focusing on because I don't think anyone really talks about it. So it's easy to, especially in this day and age when everyone's moving so fast, to forget to slow down. Because somebody tells you that, hey, it's okay to slow down and just enjoy the moments for what they are, right?
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I think talking about the way people think about things is really important. And, we don't discuss it enough, but I think it's because the way we've talked about before was so ambiguous, right? So when we tell someone to like mentally reframe something, how do you mentally reframe something? What are the actionable things that you do in order to reframe your mindset, right? And I think, just as someone, let's say, for instance, we'll go back to the workout analogy. Right? Like there are things that you are just in tune with as far as a workout goes that you enjoy, right? Like for instance, I enjoy dance. Like that would be awesome workout all the time, right? But I understand that there's other things that like I don't enjoy as much, but I know it's necessary to meet my goals. If I just think like, oh, I'm dreading this and I don't want to lift this weight or whatever, it makes my goal 10 times harder to like achieve, in my perspective.
Absolutely.
And if I just look at it as like, oh, I'm doing something really great for myself and I'm just even happy to be able to be here, it automatically makes the workout 10 times better. It's so much easier. And I feel like that's with anything because I don't think life is without doing things that you struggle with doing, right? I think we all need to struggle to a certain degree, right? So it's more so like, how do you perceive that struggle? Like, if you look at it as like, this is necessary for me, and so I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to challenge myself, and I'm going to make it something that maybe I could gamify, so that way I feel like I'm achieving something every step of the way versus only when I get to the very end.
That's right. The secret is treating life like a video game.
Going back to it. No, I think that's
dude,
I would agree with that.
Dude, right? Like, I don't know. Did you like play a lot of RPGs growing up?
I did.
Right? It's like, oh, it's really applicable to real life because RPGs, they design it to kind of base off life, right? Oh, we're who put our hours into this. You're getting EXP points for that. We're building our levels and our prowess for this skill, this thing, whatever. Like, I think being able to gamify certain aspects of your life definitely makes the process so much more fun, man.
I agree.
Routing back to what you're talking about, like working out, like, and the things not one may not initially find joy in. I think a really important thing for folks to really build, and it's a tough one, is discipline too, right? As lovely as it is, the idea to try to make everything be grateful for everything and to find joy in every little aspect. Sometimes it's just really hard, right?
Yeah.
And for those moments, that's where you just add a dash of discipline, and that's what takes you from A to Z, right? Because sometimes when you lose discipline, you lose track, and then everything spirals, and it's like, oh, how do I get back on my feet?
It's the discipline.
Discipline, man.
It's funny when we talk about discipline, it's usually something that we could do repetitively, right? Like over and over and over again. And I think one of the things that we don't think about to be disciplined at is how we manage our emotions. And what I mean by that is, for instance, I've been doing this more often, right?
Yeah.
And whenever I'm doing something, I'm feeling slightly a little bit down for whatever reason, because sometimes I don't know why I'm feeling the way I feel. I look at what's around me and I think about how I could be grateful for these things, right? And it's as simple as having a good meal, or just being in the presence of friends, or having this conversation with you, or just reconnecting. Like, that's actually one of the thoughts I had with you. You know, I thought I'm going to tell you this now, but you know, since we started hanging out again and you host the Tuesdays, I was like, oh, I'm so grateful for the fact that, like, you know, we've met and you're doing this thing now. We get to reconnect, like, years down the line, you know, and I'm having such a great time, and it feels like a great community. I want to thank you for that, you know, and I don't say it in a way where it is too outwardly spoken to you. I'll say, like, thanks for hosting us tonight, you know,
I appreciate
but it's more than that, right? And I think that's what I'm trying to get better at, is like, how do I elaborate more clearly and what I'm thinking, and not just what I'm thinking, but what I'm grateful about, you know? And I think that practice, that action of, you know, elaborating on your thoughts and how you feel in a positive note is going to be something really important in the future, because I do feel like now a lot of people are going through a lot of mental health issues, you know, and they don't know how to get out of it or how to reframe, right? And I think talking about these things, and, you know, my own, like, protocols on doing it is something like that. And you know, I hope that I'm going to learn more different ways of doing it, other than the things I've talked about, like journaling, meditating. I think they're all very important. And, you know, just to kind of be transparent, I kind of went through that this morning, right? This morning I literally woke up and I was like, I have a list of things to do, and some things that it feels like I can't overcome it today. Like, I'm like, I don't know what the solution to this is, right? And early in the morning, it gave me such anxiety, right? And I was like, fuck, what the hell am I going to do? But life goes on. Like, I got to do all these other things, but that means this thing will be in the back burner, right? And it's very important. It's a very important thing. And it has to do with money, right? And I think finances bring a lot of, like, anxiety to a lot of people's lives.
You gotta tell me. I feel you.
Yeah, so I was like, fuck, what do I do about this? Like, how can I solve this? And then I had a different thought today, right? Other than the fact that, like, I was trying to be more present. So, you know, when I was doing the other tasks, I just mainly try to focus on that task, not let that feeling of anxiety from what I need to do kind of seep into what I was doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, just to go back into things that we were talking about before, as far as relationships go, I know that you said you spent a lot of time alone afterwards, just reflecting and taking in the advice of your mentor, right? Like, why do you think that, as far as relationships goes, it's probably one of the biggest parts of our lives, right? Like, most people's end goals are to have a family, right? And that revolves around relationship building. Why do you think that it's something that we're not, going back to knowing what we know, something that we don't know that well?
So there are two things. I think it's the biological aspect. Like, as humans, we're born. Our sole duty as a human is to procreate, recreate, you know, make more of us. And also culturally, right? Not even just like us being Asian American, but also just in the world. Like, you grow up, you see people of happy families, and that's like, oh, that's such a beautiful idea. I want to do that too. But no one ever really talks about, like, all the intricate steps and the little nuances it takes to get there, because these are things you just have to learn through experience, I believe. You can tell somebody the complete blueprint on how they live their lives to get their family, but if you followed it, you may get an entirely different result, right?
It's true.
Because everyone's life is unique and independent, and we all have our different variables that make it so dynamic. So it is really just for up to us, the individual, to just live that life, live our life, and then see what works for us, and then how we could get from just being by ourselves to being in a relationship, and then hopefully only that one, because Lord knows we're gonna be in a couple more. But
Yeah.
it's just, I think that's just the reality of the human condition.
Yeah, I I also do believe, going back to our biology, yeah, we're meant to procreate, right? And I've talked about this a couple times where back then when we first started as human beings procreating, it wasn't like we understood love, right? We probably didn't talk to each other because there was no language.
Yeah.
Right. So now that we're more conscious and we understand how things work to a certain degree, right? We're
To a
still,
certain degree, yeah.
mainly ignorant of things. So we have to place like certain meanings and like values on the human condition as we develop.
Yeah.
Right. Like what is love, and why did I believe as a child that love superseded everything that might make a relationship fail?
I think this, because I relate to that too, especially when I was much younger. I think it has to us being has to do with us being Vietnamese. Culturally, our culture is very romantic. The Vietnamese are very romantic people, right? If you listen to any old songs that our parents used to listen to, more often than not, it's about love and the idea of love, their idea of love, what it means to be happy. Oh, I'm in a relationship. I'm chasing this girl of my dreams. So far, so forth. I got the girl of my dreams. I lost her. Lots of love in our people. All right. So I think naturally it makes sense as to why the idea of love, whether indirectly or directly impacted both you and I, leading us to growing up having it be this like all powerful idea that we need in our lives because it's so strong, right? But growing up experiencing the reality of it, it's like, oh, sometimes love has like an Achilles heel or two or three. Oh man, maybe it's not as powerful as I thought it was.
Going back to what we were saying, how things change and we can't really approach meeting someone in the same ways, right?
A lot has happened during COVID changed everything, right? You got the Me Too movement, people getting canceled, people getting scared of getting canceled, right? Like you said earlier about like just back in the day, guys would just go up to girls behind in the club or whatever, start dancing, fraternizing. But you do that nowadays, it's like, ooh,
you're the weirdo now.
Yeah, you're a creep. Why would you do that if I'm asking, right? So definitely lots changed. Not to say
consent is huge now, as it should.
As it should be. Not to say that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying a lot has definitely changed from when we were much younger to now, and how you approach women, how you date, so far and so forth. And you mentioned dating nowadays is really difficult, and I highly think so, because especially us now as adults, we're working, we're not in situations as often where we're meeting new people. More often than not, right? And especially in America, I believe that dating has gotten a lot more shallow and superficial, where it's a lot about more on the things, people look for things on the surface as opposed to what's within or what's beneath that. Like, a lot of girls might be like, I want a 6'6" guy who makes $1 jillion, who drives a Rolls Royce, so far, so forth. Not saying that's everybody, but there is that camp of people that exist, right? And when you see that all the time on social media, as content, it's like, as a man, you may ask yourself like, damn, am I good enough? Am I just inferior? Do I have a shot? Like, and these are really troubling thoughts to have, especially if you're younger, trying to get a hold of just who you are as an individual, as opposed to just like, even dating, right?
Yeah, because going back to what you're saying is there's that checklist that we believe, especially as guys, that we have to fulfill in order to even be deserving of attention or love in that way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's it. Kind of pulls at who you are as a person. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's some people who are born to be like that.
Yeah.
Like they're built like that, right? They're meant to be that guy who does all those things and checks off all those boxes. But I think a lot of us are now kind of being programmed to think like that, even though that's not innately true to our nature.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up definitely thinking that I want to be really, really rich. I think a lot of people do feel like that, and that's due to society standards, right?
Yeah.
But now looking at things from a objective standpoint where, you know, I look at, let's say, using the word joy, right? I don't see it coming from these things that I'm chasing of who I should be. The idea that other people have placed on me, you know? I'm starting to find a lot more joy in things that don't even require money, really, you know?
Yeah.
I think everything requires you to have funds now, especially we live in America, right?
Yeah.
And that's like another thing. It's like understanding how much of that is you and versus how much of that is what you expect, right? Because you know, now I look at myself, I'm like, oh, I don't really live an extremely lavish lifestyle, even though that's what I wanted when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, I find myself to, you know, have a lot more of those like joyous moments, and it's just due to the simple things like being around with friends, playing some games, you know, having good conversation, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. I think more emphasis should be have for, especially like the younger kids, new generation, Generation Alpha, right? Like, just enjoy little things. I think the big picture for anything in life is just the accumulation of all the small things, where it's like things to be grateful for. It's all like the small things in life, right? Rather than like, oh, this big thing that you're chasing, because like you said earlier, like the end result, the feelings you get from getting that accomplishment, that's fleeting. You'll be happy in the moments, but then give it a week, maybe even just a day, you'll be like, all right, my feelings are back to normal. Right. Whereas if you can just appreciate and consistently remind yourself to be grateful for meals with friends, meals by yourself, going to the movies, small things, right? I think the overall view on your own life is just so much more gratifying, so much more rewarding, fulfilling.
So I gotta ask you now that you mentioned that your life is just basically all the small moments put together.
Oh,
right?
for sure. For sure.
What was something that you changed your mind about as far as like the small things actually being very important?
Oh, dude. So it was you earlier today. I had basically an hour-long Google Meets call with my friend Hung, who owns a fashion brand called Ludang, which means gangster in Vietnamese. And then he wanted because I grew up with streetwear. There was a very natural, organic part of my life. Like, it was just what I grew up with. And he wanted my input on that. And then it made me ask myself, like, how did I even get into this world, right? And then came back to so English wasn't my first language, and growing up from like kindergarten to I think first or second grade, my parents always made me wear a uniform. They wouldn't let me wear other things that other kids wear. And if you've been to a public school, wearing a uniform in a public school might be kind of jarring. People might call you weird, make fun of you. That's what I went through, right? So then I remember I was always wearing a white U.S. Polo Association, white polo, poorly fitting dark blue denim pants, and I had this geeky comb over that my mom would always do every day. And then it made, I hated it so much. I kept paying attention to what other kids were wearing. When I'd go to the mall, I'd pay extra attention to what they were selling at like Paxa and Azumi's, like all the mall core stuff. And then I think that was the start of it for me. Like, that seemingly insignificant part of my life where my parents just made me wear a uniform to school evolved to me building a genuine interest and love into textiles and stuff that we as humans put on our body, and then building a career off of that, right? Or even like the chance encounter meeting someone online in real life. One of so many of my best friends to this day or just like random or originally just either random people that just came into my shop originally as customers. A lot of people you meet at the tournament, like Alex, who's now my roommate. Like he was originally just someone that just walked into my store, right? And over time, I built such a strong relationship with him. Or like people that back in the days of like when people were on forums more often, like meeting people on forums or just knowing them online through video games, and then building like a personal relationship, meeting them in person. All right, seemed really insignificant at first, but then those moments definitely blossomed into something that has a really strong presence in my life, and I'm so grateful for it. Like even Vincent, our mutual friend, I'm opening up a cafe with him now, man. That's one of my best buds now, and I met this dude on Craigslist. You guys gotta know. So Vincent, one of the founders of Bolsa Supply Keyboard Company. Back when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, I noticed a lot of people wearing Dunks. I didn't have a pair of Dunks. I could not afford brand new Dunks. So I was on Craigslist. I was like, looking up Nike Dunks. Oh, this one looks cool. Reasonably priced, near me. Then up this dude at Bolsa Grande High School. I think it was during a TED Hocha or the TED Festival. And yeah, it didn't seem like much. It was a simple transaction. And I ran into him later in life. And we just became good friends, And here we are. So there's so many moments like that in my life that at first seem insignificant, but have really just been like, it was like a precursor to something really big, at least for me.
For me, I think I've come to realize this later on, and maybe I couldn't have realized it earlier because, you go at your own pace.
Yeah.
And it's just like the whole relationships and love thing. It's like you could tell someone how to do things, but, sometimes you just need to experience it, right?
Absolutely.
And my experience was that I just kept on thinking so much of the good old times.
Yes.
I'm like, why is this something that's constantly on my mind and nagging at me that, like, this used to be so fun where we could just hang out. Like, one of the things I recently thought about, right, which was back then when I was younger and in my teenage years, me and my friends would love to visit each other at each other's workplaces. Like, oh, Ellie's working at Wetzel's Pretzels. Let's go visit him, while he's like making pretzels and shit. Oh, Ampil's working at Journeys. Let's go over there and like check out the shoes. And it's something as little as just stopping by to say what's up to your friend. And those things are so fun, you know, and it's something that we don't really do as much anymore because I think, I don't want to say like adult jobs, but like jobs, that are, that require a little bit more privacy. We can't really stop in as much, and I think going back to the idea that everything's temporary, it's like, I wish that I would have realized it a little bit earlier because then I would have been more appreciative for those times. And now that we don't really have them because it's difficult, maybe in your cases might be a little bit easier, but like, let's say someone who's like a lawyer, you can't just stop in by the law office and be like, yo, what's up? Like, can we chat for a second?
Yeah. It might be kind of weird. I feel you.
Exactly.
I think a common consensus I've reached with a lot of people, either our age or older, is like, dang, I would pay all the money in the world to be a teenager again with the wisdom that I have now, right? To be able to know how to appreciate, because I think being able to appreciate something is a skill that people learn throughout their lives, one, and to just be able to re-experience those moments and to see it with a different lens, right? Be like, oh man, now that I know how to appreciate this and I'm in this moment again as a kid, it's like, man, I'm really taking it in. But with that said, I think that it's better to realize that you appreciated it than to never realize it at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think people could go their whole lives without doing that,
People do.
And think we, especially now, like as adults, we want to pass on to like the youth, right? Like, hey, like make sure that you're intentional with your friends, you're present, because these things, they're not going to last forever.
Yeah.
Right. And, as much as we tell them that, it's like giving them the blueprint. It's up to them to like understand that and realize it. But I think there is actionable ways of doing it though to a
Yeah.
certain degree. And one of the things that I did was that when I was thinking, oh, I miss the good old times.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, why the good old times? Why not the good new times? Right now, with the knowledge and experience, like the knowledge and experience that we wish we had, now that we do have it, how come we don't implement it, right, to create these new memories and these experiences with people? And I think now, while it is more difficult because adult lives come with adult responsibilities,
Yeah.
that also means that we have like the knowledge and the experience to make these things happen, even though they are more difficult to make happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have now the access to cars and funds and communication,
And Google,
Yeah.
everything. No,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Um, I think you brought in a really good point. Like, I don't think it's healthy for anyone to always be heavily fixated on the past, right? I think it's important to reflect and show gratitude for moments in the past that were to you maybe fundamental or brought you a lot of joy. But yeah, we should always be striving to make the present and the future just as fun.
Yeah.
I remember, I think I was talking to my godbrother like many, many years ago when I was in high school. I think he said to me like, "Oh yeah, man, college. That was like some of the best years of my life. Best years of my life." I'm like, I couldn't help it. Like, I didn't say it, but at that moment, I was very young. I was like, why aren't your current years the best years of your life, right? Why can't we continue to keep pumping out the best years of our life? Why does the happiness, or what seems like the idea of peak happiness, have to end there, right? So yeah, I feel you, man. We gotta be proactive in creating these moments and experiences for ourselves, for us to just be joyful about. Because a lot of people forget, myself included sometimes. We get so swept up with responsibilities and just life of being now an independent adult that we may forget.
So to kind of elaborate on that idea of happiness and having the good time still ahead of us, I think one of the biggest things that has changed from us being kids to adults is expectations. And what I mean by that is, when you're a child, a lot of things seem to just fall into your lap, and it's fun because you have no expectations of how it works, right? And what I mean by that is, like, a lot of things that you do as a kid, it's kind of forced on you by your parents.
Yeah.
Your school, things like that. So you just experience it. You're just there to go through, like,
Yeah.
oh, you tell me what to do, I'll do it. I don't know what it's gonna be like, and I'm gonna enjoy it. And now, as adults, we have certain expectations, right? And I think, I don't know how to say this in a way where I'm not trying to say expectations are useless. I think there's a purpose for it, but I think realistic expectations is what we should strive for. I think in our lives, like, we always like the things that come naturally to us, right? And it's almost like we were after things that we have to work for. And I think if we just expected everything to come with work, right, and instead of things just to fall into our laps, that we could live with the idea of making things for ourselves versus them just coming to us.
Yeah.
And I think doing that also allows things to come to us. We attract that, because, for instance, for example, a lot of people hit me up to, like, go out and do things, right? And that's because I was always very proactive about making things happen.
Yeah.
And so then when people, want to have fun or do whatever, it's like they're always like, Pete, what are you up to? Or even not even just like having fun, right? Let's talk about having conversations, meaningful conversations, right?
Yeah.
Like, we do this podcast and we have these conversations. So now people who are my friends and family, if they want to have a deep conversation, they know they can have it with me, because I've built this and I've worked at it in order for us to open up the space to other people.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the goals of the podcast in general too. Is like, if you watch it, right, and then what the point of it is, right, is to open up communication and, like, dialogue, you're more likely to do it.
That's true. I think, myself included, like, growing up, I've always had so many walls around the idea of socializing, at least beyond the surface level, with family, right? So being able to, I think that's why I chose to be so proactive towards making friends outside of family and nourishing those relationships so much because I was so scared to this day, in many ways scared of the idea of trying to build that relationship with my actual family. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Working on it. That's something
it's
I'm
tough.
definitely working on for sure. My Cause like I know for a fact my parents would love to just like spend time with me one on one. I used to just go drink cafe with my dad and just smoke and talk about bullshit. I haven't done that in a while. But then my girlfriend actually brought up an idea. Maybe you should be more proactive about that again. My mom and dad are together but physically separated. She works in Vegas.
Mm.
So she comes here like once a month, once every other month. And then my girlfriend brought up the idea. I was like, yo, why don't you just, ask your mom. She just wants to hang out with you for once. Because usually when she's here, it's like with the whole family, da 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 da.
Mm.
I'm like, that's not a bad idea, right? I'm gonna take her out somewhere cool and just have a conversation. I think I've been so scared of that for so long. I think it's time for me to put on my big boy boots and like try to reapproach this again. I think it's a good time.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you said about talking to your inner child, little Tony, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you should ask little Tony, like, why is he so scared of this?
It always stems back to something in the childhood. I've never really had issues with my mom, but then my idea of, or my view of my mom and my dad are kind of like very together. They're my parents, of course. My mom's always been super chill. My dad had a hot temper to him, like very classic Vietnamese dad, always yelling, always loud. He's partially deaf in one ear too, so it doesn't help. He's super loud.
Gotta turn
man.
the volume up twice.
Yeah, dude, it's like 2x. I mean, he's calmed down so much over the years, which has been great. But like, I remember one time I was saying something to him, but it wasn't in a formal enough way, right? You know how formalities are in Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Why are you talking to me like I'm your friend? I'm not your friend. I'm your father. So treat me like your father, right?" And then that always kind of made me so averse to wanting to get closer to him. And that moment, it haunts me, dude. It lingers. I'm like, man, I want to be a friend. But then as I get older too, it's like I do notice and I do really appreciate the moments where, me and my parents have just been like buds. Like, I like that.
I think that's like generational trauma, dude.
Dude,
That's literally something that your pops probably learned from his pops and so on and so forth.
And I recognize that, so I don't hold it against him. My dad's dad wasn't there for him in his life. My father's father was an entertainer. He was like I forgot if he was a singer or something or magician or gasei or whatever in Vietnam. But then he was pretty big, but then he wasn't really there or present as a father. So my dad had to learn to fend on his own. Like he would tell me stories about how like, dude, it was rough. Like to get food sometimes he would just go up to random like food stalls on the street where he was born in Saigon, and just work the day, just to get fed, right? So. And I know for him, all he wanted was a better life for me. And that, I think, in that way, he achieved his mission, man. He provided me. Without the sacrifices that my parents have been through, and this is something I will never, never, never be ignorant about, or like, I will never refuse to acknowledge it, is that without their sacrifices, I wouldn't have the opportunity to quite literally chase my dreams and just live the life that I feel like I want to live, rather than a life that I feel like I should live. And to that, I'm deeply appreciative of my folks.
Dude, thanks for sharing that. And I know that you mentioned earlier you have a couple pivotal moments in your life, like your mom not allowing you to wear streetwear, so that's how you fell in love with it. And it seems like you're constantly having those revelations, right? For sure. What would you say is another turning point of yours, like growing up and being Asian American, specifically Vietnamese? chasing something that is, I wouldn't say it's like taboo, but it's definitely not the conventional norm as far as like a career.
It was super big back. I believe this was 2016, 2015 or 2016. Excuse me. I would. I am in this Facebook group called Cartel Talk. Cartel Talk was dedicated to just having streetwear enthusiasts from around the world have like a little forum to kind of like post like the stuff that they like, post their outfits of the day, their new pickups, new release information for things that we may be mutually interested in. And I built a lot of lifelong friends from this group. People I've met in real life. Da 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 da. I was. It was a Thursday. I was at Supreme in Los Angeles when there's no Fairfax, and one of my friends from the group is Cameron Cruel. He asked if I wanted to meet up, and I was like, oh fuck yeah. We met up at this store that's no longer around. Rest in peace. Called Round Two. Round Two Consignment Clothing Store. And we were chilling there for a bit, just happy to be in each other's graces, chilling. All right. Because it's weird. It's like when you meet a online friend in real life for the first time, it's not like you guys are strangers, because like you guys typically already know a good amount about each other. So just like for me, it felt like running into an old friend, right? And he was like, oh, my buddy owns a store around the street, or around the corner, want to check it out? I'm like, sure. At this point I had negative, not even any ounce of information about the world of designer fashion. Not even in the States, in Asia, anything. Right? I was just complete streetwear boy. I was wearing the Comme des Garçons Converse shoes with the hearts on it, and I thought it was the hot shit because I didn't have the regular joints. I had the Jack Purcells, hard to find. I had the black pair on my left foot, but no, we weren't gonna keep it with the double black shoes. I had the mismatch right cream pair. So I had 2 sets of these shoes, and for that day, Supreme drop day, I was like, I'm gonna wear 2 different colors of shoes. And I had like a full like tiger camo, like military streetwear looking get up going on. I thought I was the hot shit, right? So we went to his friend's store. It's owned by this couple named Kel and Miyabi. I'll never forget. It was my first time walking to like a little boutique showroom. It was in the cut. It was on the intersection of Pico and La Brea. So if you guys aren't familiar, that's typically where you can find like automotive shops. Man, in the same little complex where Horror Vaco was, that's a store I used to work at. There, during the day it was like an improv class or something.
Oh wow.
And during the night, it was a Russian prostitute sex ring. It was crazy. Because then, like, sometimes I'd work late hours, and I'd see and I'd hear some crazy shit. There used to be 2 dispensaries. I was there when there was like there's a SWAT raid on one of them. Sketchy tax guy. It was wild, man. But anyways, so I walked into the store for the first time, and immediately, mind you, my ego is at an all-time high. I think I'm the hot shit. They're like, "What the fuck are you wearing?" Just clowning my ass, right? Kel was like, Kel and Miyabi just like laughing. I'm like, I don't look stupid. I think I'm cool. They're like, nah. They broke me down piece by piece, and I was like, damn, right? And then proceeded to show me like, okay, all right, Tony, let me put you on. So this is a brand called Undercover by Jun Takahashi from Japan. Oh, this is a really cool brand called Common Projects. They make really dope everyday like luxury leather shoes and so far so forth. I'm like, whoa, like that was the moment where I felt like I rediscovered streetwear, but except this was a different element of streetwear, or this is more elevated fashion. I'm like, oh, this is super cool. So I just kept coming back. Mind you, at the time I was a college student. I went to UC Riverside. That was like 2 hours away, man, but like 3-4 times a week. Jeez. After class, boom, going straight there. I want to learn. I want to meet people. I want to get immersed in this world, because it was so exciting. Like just being in LA at that time. I wasn't jaded yet. Oh, yeah. I got so jaded by LA at a certain point. But anyways, yeah, they're putting me on. It was really wholesome. Like Kel is always, and they're always to me like the older siblings I never had. Right, putting me on game to stuff every day after the store closed. Like I'd be there all day, from and we just like get like dinner as friends, and then they'd show me this and that, and it was really really transformative moment in my life. And that's also just being there. And eventually Kel was like, dude, why don't, you're here all the time, when you just work here, so then I worked there from 2016 to 2019, and then boom, COVID. So I'm like, fuck. So this is where it gets deep. I'm like, just kind of like by myself. I'm like, man, I have so much time, I have nothing to do. First like half of COVID, I'm just like playing games all day. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? So I'm like, well, I have time. Why don't I try to do a proof of concept for myself? And that's how Hidden was born.
Oh, that's great that you got something out of it, because I always think there's always a reason why things happen, right?
Yeah.
And in your case, it's almost like you had to be in that position where you're like, fuck, dude, I really don't want to be in this position anymore.
Dude.
For you to change and try something like that.
Oh,
so when the
absolutely.
idea popped up in your head, and you're like, let me do this, let me make a change, were there any initial struggles going into that?
Oh, fuck yeah. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So I thought I knew what I was doing, because I was like, oh, I've seen Kel and Miyabi run their showroom. I know, like, operationally, I think I have a good idea, right? Again, at this point, I feel like I know everything. I'm young. I'm arrogant. And then life has its way of humbling you. Always. When you think you know it all, right? Like, from like product photography, I didn't know how to do product photography properly. I didn't know how to edit on Photoshop. I had to self-teach myself all these skills. I had to figure out, oh, how do I source models? Oh, where do I, what do I put on the racks? How do I properly merchandise? Like, how do I know what sells? How do I keep replenishing product? I'm like, oh, fuck. Maybe I don't really know it all. And then there are all these issues that I ran into as a business operator that I didn't know how to tackle at first. But then over time, you adapt. It's sink or swim, right? You gotta keep it pushing, keep being proactive in the spirit of learning, or your business falls flat. Whether it's a clothing shop, a restaurant, or just about anything, right?
Yeah.
We have to be mindful about, okay, what's working right now, what's not working, what can I improve on, how can I better market, how can I do X, Y, and Z, what can I afford to put funds into, what can I not afford to put funds into now that I should put funds into later, right? And again, touching back on discipline, having the discipline to be 110% present for your business at all times, even when you're not working, right? Because I'm sure you understand running a podcast. Even when you're not running the podcast, when you're just chilling, you're probably just thinking, oh, maybe I could do this little thing to make the podcast better. Maybe I could add this to make the experience more interactive. Maybe I could do X, Y, Z, right? So I think that's a frame of mind when you get into building your own operation for just about anything. That is so crucial to have. Not even just to succeed, but to stay afloat, right?
Well, I'm glad. I mean, you're doing well now, so I mean, obviously it worked out. Sink or swim. You didn't sink, but
Oh, I did sink a few times. I'll get into that, man. Like, back into relationships. Like,
was that all around the same time too? By the way,
what was?
like when you were starting Hidden, and then your past relationships.
Oh yeah, it all affected around the same time. Oh man, it was rough. So there's a lot of personal development I had to work on and then go through in the moment. A lot of which I was quite frankly not ready for, right? Because sometimes, before I move forward, I think my personal motto in life is that to do anything, a person must requires only two things. You have to be willing and you have to be capable. I was at that moment, maybe I was probably very willing to learn and improve and develop, but there are certain things I was just not capable with, right? And so with time. But yeah, so when I was starting the whole showroom, I was working with somebody. There's a huge fallout. There were a lot of personal things I just couldn't agree with that affected my values. A lot of things that the person I work with did that just were adversely affecting the business. A lot of money being taken from the account that I didn't know was going into.
Oh, wow.
And it was rough, man. Like, imagine working with someone, using their space, and then they're still making you pay $1,800 a month in rent, right? It's like, are you really a partner at this point? What the fuck are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And then it came to like a climax, like I believe 2 years ago, a year or two ago. I remember, I believe it was February when I was just like, you know what, I need to separate for my own good. So I took what was mine and restarted in Costa Mesa. And
Wow.
things have been,
Restarted.
dude, that was so. During that point, there's a from when I before I restarted, there was a year-long gap, I believe, or it was around a year, where I was at the lowest of lows. Like, that's around the same time I actually, yeah, the same time I got out of my relationship that went terribly, and around the same time, that same time I was like, you know what, I'm gonna restart. I At first I didn't even think I was gonna restart. I think I was just gonna, call it quits. I thought I wasn't cut for this, and I just kept to stay afloat. I was just reselling on the side, not even through my own platform, just trying to use every connection in my network, get introduced to new networks to see how I can build clients, just to literally stay afloat, right? I was so, I was just really sad, man. I didn't, my impression on my own locus of control for the outcome of my life was, it was awful. And around that time, that's also when I was just so scared of being by myself, because not only did I lose at the same time, two in one, I lost a personal relationship, my significant other, and I lost a professional relationship, and if you're doing business with someone, a professional relationship damn near feels like a personal relationship. It's basically the same thing. You're with them all the fucking time, their ins and outs,
Yeah.
how they work, so far, so forth, right? So it was a lot for me to handle, and I didn't think I'd keep doing it. But, um, I have a lot to thank my current girlfriend for. She did, I met her. She helped me get on my feet. She would let me stay at her place in K-Town when I needed to stay overnight and it would help me do meetings in LA to build clientele in LA. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know what, I think I could do this, right? So then I saved up, and I still had my own personal collection, or like just still had inventory that I built up, and I'm like, maybe we can do this. So in July 14th, it's been a little over a year now. July 14th of last year, we opened Hidden again in Costa Mesa, and that was the biggest blessing that I didn't know I needed.
Awesome comeback story.
Yeah. So shout out, Vincent and Sean from Bolsa, because we shared a unit together. I'm their upstairs neighbor, and then shout out all the friends along the way that have pushed me to keep moving. All right, because without them, I don't think I would be in the spot that I am today.
Now, I kind of want to ask you this because it sounds like one of your biggest fears was to be alone.
Yeah, for sure.
But you seem to be very well supported. You have a lot of people who believe in you, and just not even just what you're doing as far as business, but like as a person. I show up to your thing, and there's a lot of people, and it seems like you catch up with everyone. So relationships to you are very important, and I believe they're important to everyone, right? I think as a human being, we need each other. So all these years of you developing these relationships, how did you learn to foster them in the way that you got the support that you needed?
Super simple. I cherish my relationships with people because when I do, and when I put the time and care, TLC, to the people I have in my life, right? It reminds me of the relationships I didn't have when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I was often bullied. I didn't know who my real friends were, and like I was like, man, I just, little Tony can use some loving, right? So when I keep that in mind when I approach, always in the back of my head when I'm meeting people, making like friends that I want to build a relationship with, it's like, hey, show them the patience, love, and care that you wished younger Tony could have gotten in moments when he was struck down and hurt, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't really talked much about that ever, but you know, I think it's important to treat people with respect, and it's all about respect out here.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
That was a great way of putting it because a lot of this is going back to your inner child, and
Dude,
it's
for
crazy
sure.
how that is that you used your experience as a kid and all the things that you've desired and wanted as a kid, and now as an adult, you're like, okay, like maybe other people need this too, and I don't think we think about that enough.
Dude.
I think, as a child, I oftentimes formed a lot of inauthentic relationships.
Same.
You
Same
know,
here.
I think very similar to you. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that you were bullied. I was bullied a lot too. Just being in a school that's predominantly Latino and being a smaller Asian kid.
Yeah.
I think that just comes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, and it was a way for me to not be in harm's way, right? I would
Mm-hmm.
befriend people, so I'm like, you're less likely to hurt me if I
Mm-hmm.
befriend you. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
survival.
there's a whole term for that. Friends of convenience. Like,
Mm,
it's sometimes we'll befriend people because it's convenient. Like even friends that I met in college. In my first year, I was in a dorm. It's like, oh, I was friends with a lot of them, but it's because we saw each other all the time. It was more convenient for us to be friendly. It's not. But then, was I super compatible with a lot of them? I don't think so per se. Not to say anyone was bad. It's like, hey, we all have our own preferences for our circle, and I think as I get older, my circle of like near and dear friends gets so much smaller, right?
mm.
Which I used to think was unhealthy. As a kid, I was like, oh, I want to open everyone a big loving arms, right? But then sometimes there are some people that may not have your best interests at heart. Some people that maybe it's safer to keep at arm's length, not necessarily like hate, but it's like, oh, maybe we just be friends or acquaintances,
Mhm.
like not hang out all the time. But yeah, growing up and building a better gauge on like what type of people I'd want to be around all the time. That was a really big learning point for me, or
Mm.
just like continuous learning lesson actually, because it's tough because with some people, they might have like amazing first impressions. You're like, oh, this guy really gets me. Well, we have so many mutual hobbies, like we'd be best buds.
Mhm.
But then they could be just showing you an image of themselves that they want you to see so that you could be friends with them. It may have some like ulterior motive, or like, and you don't really see someone's true colors until you actually hang out with them for a prolonged period of time. Life.
Yeah, some
Life,
people
man.
are really good at interviewing. That's why, you know what I mean?
Oh
So,
yeah, oh
yeah.
yeah.
When that happens, because it's funny that I'm saying that now because I'm thinking about me as a person and how I had to adapt and just become friends with people. That means I had to be malleable, right? Even
Yeah.
though, like, I'm not very good at certain things.
Yeah.
One of the things I was really good at was understanding what people liked.
Mhm.
So, when I would speak to you, it's like, okay, like it feels like we're friends, going back
Mhm.
to what you were saying,
Yeah.
and I did that all the way to when I took it towards like career, like
Yeah.
I would interview for jobs and it was the same way. You put on
Yeah.
a mask, in order to
Mhm.
get what you want. And now as an adult, I still believe that in order for us to function in society, that's still necessary to a certain
Yeah.
degree, but I think it hurts us when it bleeds into our everyday life. You know what I mean? I'm unlearning that now because there's so many times, especially with my personal relationships, where I feel like I know what needs to be said and I know what I want to say, right?
Dude,
And it's like
I feel
two
you.
different things.
Oh my goodness, that's something that I am actively trying to figure out to this day. It's like a lot of times with my partner, my really close friends, they're like, oh, there's something that I want to say, but I can't say. I feel like I can't say it because I know it's gonna come off the wrong way or just hurt someone's feelings, or
Mm.
it might just be the complete last thing I need to do if I want to get a certain result, right? Sometimes you say something, you're too transparent, or you deliver it in a weird way, people can receive it completely wrong. You're like, fuck you, and then you're back to square negative one.
Yeah,
Ah,
I think a lot of that has to do with that wall we were talking about, right? Like whether it's with our parents or teachers or whatever, right? We want to, I wouldn't say it's called code switching, but we communicate in a certain way to relay the message. And I think that splits as we have harder time identifying which is which, right? And it should align, meaning like what you want to say and what needs to be said should be concise with each other. Right. But it seems like it's almost two things, because sometimes a lot of it lies within the side of comfort, meaning what needs to be said usually is very uncomfortable. What you want to say is something that's comfortable, so therefore you don't have to deal with the awkward moments, right?
Dude, yeah, man, I could be a bitch, man. Like I could be so passive when I need to like not be passive, and I'm like, just because I'm not necessarily scared of confrontation. I've dealt with so much confrontation in my life, but then sometimes, like, in my life, I know that it's important to pick my battles, right? And some battles I just don't want to take, right? Some battles are just, for me, not worth the emotional toll, the energy, because I'm like, dude, one of the biggest things that has a strain on me as a human is interpersonal conflict with people I care about, like getting into argument with people that I actually give a shit about, right? It's like, oh, it weighs on me so much when there's like active like beef in the air or something and it involves me. I'm like, oh fuck, dude, this is the worst. What can I do to make this right if I'm in the wrong, or if they did something wrong? It's like, oh, will they be both willing and or capable to do what they need to do to make it right? You know, it's tough. And like sometimes I'm so scared to say what needs to be said, right? What needs to be said, because I mean, maybe I have like a deep innate fear of like addressing the problem at hand. All right, so then this is my segue into my first time doing psychedelics, dude. Shout out mushroom and acids. I'm not like addicted by any means, but then I will say my first time having like ego death was an experience when I did acid. One of my first times with my at my house in Riverside when I was back in college. My really close friends, shout out Tim, Jen, so forth. I was I had all these insecurities and problems in my head that I kind of realized, but I never really thought about, right? Like never put them in the forefront to address it. My first time doing acid, like, dude, it completely shot my ego, and I was like just face to face with all these things that I didn't like about myself, things that I was scared about, and then I confronted them. And I was like, dude, this is sick. Yeah. Good times.
Nice, dude. I actually have never had that, even though I've done like psychedelics. And usually for me, whenever I do psychedelics, it's a very visual thing. Extremely visual. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Dude, that's the best though, man.
Yeah, it's entertaining. Yeah. So unfortunately, a lot of times when I'm doing psychedelics is at like a party or something. Yeah. Which there's typically too many things going on, and I'm like, I'm a person who I want to be present, and doing psychedelics kind of takes me out of that.
Yeah.
But I've done it in very chill situations. That's cool. And again, I'm not pushing anyone to do these things, right? Like if you do, like seek medical help in order for you to do the right dosage and things, because some people don't come back. To be honest,
that's true.
There's that side of things too.
Yeah, I think your head definitely needs to be ready for it in a way.
Yeah.
Right. Again, like some people seek it as like an escape. Oh, like maybe they'll hear that. Oh, mushrooms have been known to be helpful for people with depression. But it's like if your headspace isn't ready for it, and it's really tough to tell when you are ready for it. I feel like in your heart you just kind of know. But yeah, if you're not ready for it and you're just like hopping on shrooms, you're gonna be in for a wild ride that might be very, very uncomfortable, right? But I think the timing of when I did that particular acid trip, that was one of my first times. It was very, very developmental. It taught me to really be face to face, like learn to be more comfortable being face to face with things that I'm uncomfortable about myself. But to this day, I still have issues, especially when I have issues with people. Sometimes I'll teeter the line on not even addressing it because I'm scared. So I that's something I'm still working on.
You think maybe it has anything to do with the fact that, going back to your childhood, like speaking to your dad in a certain way and him kind of pushing you towards the opposite way and kind of rejecting your advances as like a friend thing might have stuck with you to the point where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to lose that. You know,
Yeah.
like maybe if I would have addressed it in the way that he would receive it correctly, that he wouldn't have even said that to me and reject my advances, right?
Yeah, and just like other moments in life where I've had like really strong waves of sadness come from the result of like rejection, whether it's from like someone I'm chasing or from friends or from just about anything. Like the idea of rejection has been so strongly, or the fear of rejection has been so strongly molded into my brain that like even though I'm much more better handled to equipment now, I still have moments where I do feel that fear and the adverse feeling of even trying to want to address it. I actually took I did therapy for the first time last year to actually cope with that exact thing. Helped a fuck ton, but still there are moments where I'm like, damn, how do I navigate this situation? Sometimes I don't have the answers, but I'm never too hard on myself because I know that like everyone we're just human. Sometimes you don't have the answers and that's okay, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I think going back to the whole experience thing, sometimes we do have to experience certain things for us to get to that point, right? Like we're just not capable, like you were saying. So my dad is sick, right? He's been sick for a while, but he has COPD, which is like constricted oxygen pulmonary disorder, which means that like his the pathways in which he breathes is like very inflamed, and it's really hard to get air. Usually happens when you smoke, you know, Vietnamese dads and cigarettes, and they love smoking, you know. So you know, when he went to the hospital, it was pretty bad because he couldn't breathe. You know, you die when you can't breathe, and luckily they got him plugged up to oxygen tank, and you know, it was helping him for a bit. But it's not the first time that he's been in the hospital, but it's the closest that I've felt like he was to death, and that was such a reality check to myself and hopefully to him too, because you know we've been telling him to quit for years. And you know, I went to the hospital, and I was gonna bring my laptop and you know sit there watch him, because you know we always had one family member kind of be there with him. And much like your dad, you know, there's a lot of similarities where he yelled at me a lot when I was a kid, so it was really hard to talk to him, right? And but I sat there and I was like, wow, I'm not gonna bring my laptop. Well, prior to me getting there, I was like, I'm not gonna bring my laptop. It's gonna be silent at certain points. You know, it's just gonna be me and him in the room, and I'm gonna see what develops. And at one point, I was nodding off because I was just sitting there, not really doing too much. And he was like, "Hey, come lay in the hospital bed with me." You know, it's a small bed, but I laid down next to him, and I was thinking, like, "Wow, I have not had a moment like this with my pop since I was like tiny." You know, and not to say like laying on the bed or whatever, but it's like just to be that close to him. You know, and
I see.
And I was talking to him, you know, asking him stories. I actually brought this notebook that you know talks about your life and asks you about your parents.
Yeah.
And he was so happy to talk to me about these things that I felt like these conversations should have happened when I was younger.
It's long overdue, right?
So long overdue.
Dude,
And
I feel that, man.
it's such a way for life to kind of humble you and be like, these things aren't here forever, you know. And I felt like going back to it, it's like I needed to have these conversations with them, you know. And it took this, right? It took this experience.
I feel, dude, I resonate with that very heavily, man. Like, if anything, it's an active reminder for me to push myself. It's like, hey, man, Tony, you got to keep trying. Put in the reps to make the effort. Because a lot of it is, I notice, it's on me. I'm building these walls. I'm the reason why these conversations aren't happening, at least right now. When the walls used to be from my father, right? So that trauma is... brought forth the walls like my dad used to have, but like over time now I see his walls are like all-time low. And I think he just wants to know more about me. And I'm so defensive because I can't help it, man. I'm scared of getting hurt.
Yeah.
It happened so much when I was younger. But
And I think, going back to that generational trauma, your dad didn't know what he was doing at that age that he was doing it to you. This is the first time we're living this life.
Yeah.
And, to think about our parents in that way, I think that was the biggest shift for me, was that I stopped thinking about my dad as the perfect man, the superhero. He is in his own way, right? But not perfect, right? Definitely a flawed human being. And to be able to see that and be like, maybe his approach was not the best, right? Maybe his approach caused a little bit of damage to the way I grew up and how I developed my personality. But if I know that and I could be the bigger person, right, and I understand that, and then I could have these conversations with him and be like, okay, I know that's how you think it should be, and I know that's how things have been for decades now. But maybe it's time for a change, and now we're actually having these conversations, and I sit just to hear them out. And it's not, maybe sometimes it's not even a conversation. It's literally just a one-sided listening party, and I think I'm okay with that because I've come to understand him a lot better, and I think he's getting to an age where he realizes, like, I want to know more about my child.
Yeah.
So I had a situation where I went back to Vietnam with him. I think it was like 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
And, Vietnamese parents and tattoos and stuff like that, it's a little bit taboo, right?
Yeah.
But I told my pops, I was like, yo, I'm going to get a tattoo. And he was like, no, you're not. You're not going to get a tattoo. Like, no son of mine's doing that. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you that I'm going to do it. So you have two options, right? Either I let you know when it happens so you could be involved in my life and know what's happening, or I can hide it from you. So either you want me to open up and we can learn more about each other, or I can just keep this a secret.
Man. Oh man, that's so sick. Dude, you're big for that. I love that. I love that.
Oh, it took forever though. It
Yeah,
took me
of course.
like a decade for me to be like, all right, I gotta talk to my pops about this. And I think some people just go out and do it, right? And to me, I think that fear is so insane. I have a friend who, his brother was like in his 40s when he first got his tattoo, and he waited till his dad died. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be in that position. And I want him to get to know me to the best of his capability, like now, because I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. And this time him end up in the hospital was that reality check again. So I sat down and I asked him about his past and his history, and I think you're a little bit more well versed in what you know about your family. Like I truthfully did not know my dad at all for the longest time. I think I knew what he did for us, but him as a child, like to hear about how much he struggled and how hard he had to work, I was like, oh, I see why you are the way you are.
Yes.
I see why you're so guarded.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things that stuck with me for the longest time, which is funny enough, a lot of the things that our parents impose on us typically sends us the opposite way, right?
Yeah.
Very much with you and your school uniform and streetwear. My dad was never make friends. He was like, don't make friends. Only talk to your family. Friends are not good people. Right, and that sent me the opposite direction to making hella friends, right?
Yeah.
So many
My dad would
friends.
say something teetering on the same line where it's like, well, not to not make friends, but it's like, oh, family is the most important thing in your life. You don't have anything, family will be there for you. Da 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 da. And then very much on the theme of blood is thicker than water. And then it's like, as I grew up, I made a ton of friends that I love and care for very dearly. It's like, well, I would like to say that there are many friends that I would consider on the same playing field as family. Like I would treat them as family. All right. So, yeah. Learning from parents, learning to, or living your life, building values that might contradict theirs. Like I think it's very natural. We are. I imagine you're also first generation Vietnamese American. Yeah. Yep. We're the first, man. They come from a whole different country, a whole different set of values. We're out here. independent thinking Americans, whereas they come from more collective society. So I
Mm.
think it's very, very natural that we are who we are with the ways that we think and with the worldview that we have.
Yeah, things pan out the way it did because it had to be this way. You know what I mean?
Had to be. Everything happens for a reason. It had to be, man.
Yeah, we are a product of our circumstance, you know. So it just so,
Yeah.
like, it's funny because I've talked about this a couple times where life goes full circle, right? Your parents are the adult, you know, you're the child. Now you're the adult, and your parent kind of becomes like the child again.
Yeah.
So where you have to teach them, you have to help them out, right? Even physically, you know, after a certain point, it's like you have to be there for them. That's another reason why people think about family, right? Because when my dad was in the hospital, and you know, we were all taking turns caring for him. The person that was there the most was my stepmom, right? And I was sitting with my dad at the hospital bed, and he said, "Son, you need to get married." And I've had this conversation a lot with him, right? Where I'm like, "Hey, pops, I don't even got a girl. Like, who the fuck am I gonna marry, right? First of all, maybe for money, but you know, aside from that." And I was like, you know, I don't have anyone right now, and it's not something I'm looking into really. You know, I'm not in a position to really be getting married. And he said, "Well, you know, eventually you need to, because like being alone is hard. You know, if I didn't have your stepmom right now, who would be here like looking after me? You know." And I understood where he was coming from now.
Got the angle.
Yeah, it was more so because before he would never say why, like why he would want me to get married. You know, it wasn't for love, like nothing. It's now he's presenting in a way it's like, well, who's gonna take care of you?
Like logically, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I had to sit down with him for him to really elaborate on that. You know, not that he was saying so many words, but typically when he would say, "Son, you need to get married," I'm like, yeah, pops.
Yeah.
And I would just walk away or something.
It's such a funny thing with Asian parents. Like, they'll tell you something, and when I was younger, my dad would never elaborate why. He'd just be like, "This is the way it is. This is the way.
Yeah.
Trust me. I'm old. I've experienced so much. I know more life than you. This is the way." I'm like, "But why?" You know, I always ask the why. And he's like, and when you ask for the why, you'd be like, "Oh, why are you talking back?" I'm like, "Man, screw this." Yeah. So I hear where you're coming from, man. Like, very, very dearly. Or, yeah, like that. I get it.
Going back to me talking to my dad and how he elaborated more, and maybe it is because his walls are down, but I think it's like how you were saying it. You know, I think he was willing.
Yeah.
Just wasn't capable.
All these years for his guards to break down, finally, like, you know, kind of open up a little bit.
Yeah, and I just want to say, for anyone who's listening to this, myself included, to have a optimistic perspective on things, for you to believe that they're capable, is going to be so beneficial to the relationships that you have, right? Yeah. And I think for the longest time, I thought, you know, figures in my life that were like the authority figures, like my pops, was not capable of understanding where I was coming from, and not capable to have a full-on conversation with me without saying that they know better, was the reason why I was so reluctant to have these conversations for years.
Absolutely.
You know, and I don't think that you can have these conversations in that mindset, because I think at that point you're not capable of having it either. Yeah. And a conversation is dialogue from both sides, right? And without it, you can't have anything that's remotely like productive. So you have to be ready too, and I think that having that mindset is the first thing, right? Because that just means that you're allowing it to happen. Your guards are down.
I will add to that. I think being optimistic can be beneficial, but it's also important to have that sense of realism as well, because being optimistic shows you the potential. Being realistic kind of brings it down to life, because obviously it's like, oh, if you're only optimistic and then you have expectations, right? And it's like, oh, I expect this is gonna go this way. But if you're not realistic and it goes flat, you may inherently actually do the opposite and convince yourself of not doing it again. Stop trying. Oh, it's like, oh, I was optimistic once, twice, 3 times. It didn't pan out the way I wanted it to. things fell flat, I never want to try again. Because I think I'm a victim of that. I wasn't realistic. So I think it's important to have a balance between both sides, like the yin and the yang, right?
So, okay, I kind of want to talk about that point. I think it goes back to what you mean by being optimistic, right? Because you use the word realistic and optimistic as two separate things. So that means that being optimistic is not realistic in your definition, right?
Well, you put it like that, I suppose so, yeah.
And the way I would like to say it is like being optimistic is allowing it to be a possibility, not saying that it's gonna happen. It's not a fact. Everything is by chance, right? Like you'll take this chance. You don't know. If you knew, then you would have no reluctancy to do it, right? Because you are reluctant to do it, but you just hope that it pans out well, is to me optimism, right? Versus like being negative, right, or cynical, you just believe like it's most likely not going to happen, right? So already you set the tone. I think that's the thing, right? Like I know that how you feel because I used to say the same thing a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist. Me thinking I know everything, you know?
Yeah.
And really what it is just a tone, right? Like I think in both cases there's chances of it not happening, not panning out, because reality only happens once it happens.
That's valid. That's pretty valid. Can't fault you there, man. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, yeah, I think that's the mindset, because it does more than just, it's not just a mindset thing, right? Well, what does it do for you? I think it follows up in your approach. You know what I mean? Like, if I was cynical about something and my dad says, like, just get married, I'd be like, all right, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm over this. Out. If I take it as, like, the optimistic perspective, I'm like, okay, he said he wants me to get married. Why? You know, allow him to explain himself, right? And if he doesn't, it's okay. Like, at least I allowed him to do that. It's a possibility that he could do it. Like, it's more possible than it's not.
All right, man. So, I don't know if I told you this, but your brother, Albert, was actually a really big part of my life when I was in high school. I always saw what he was doing with, well, Feel Good and Invictus back in the day, and I was like, oh man, this is the guy. Like, you know, he's the MC. Hip hop was so big in my life at the time, so the idea of just being an MC and seeing someone that looked like me do it, I didn't know any other like Vietnamese Americans MCs doing their thing growing up, was just like so big. I was like, man, I kind of do something like that on a motor, you know, that's sick, right? But yeah, I just, like, it's been many years since I've seen you. It's been quite a while since I've seen your brother too, so I figured I'd ask, like, how's he doing, like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it on the podcast before. He is, personally, I don't think he's doing that well. I'll kind of talk about a situation we had recently. You know, I think he was in your situation when the pandemic happened. You know, he was playing games, and, you know, just like everything in life, sometimes people don't get out of it. And I think his life has been on a standstill. I think he's been using, and, you know, to kind of fill everyone in, you know, my brother used to be very proactive about doing a lot of things, very social, even though he considers himself an introvert now. And the transformation is that he's been just kind of cooped up in his room playing video games, and it's been years, you know, and again, his life feels like it's been on a standstill, and I think that's what he feels like too. And because that feeling of your life not moving along, I think that's why he resorts to playing video games. You know, I think this is actually, weirdly enough, more common than just between you or my brother.
It's a huge thing in Japan. Like, they have a whole term for it, you know, like social shut-ins, hikikomori. Like, I didn't know that about your brother. I'm really sorry to hear.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You know, it's something that I've been sitting with for a long time. I've talked about on the podcast, and maybe as of a more recent update, we had like an intervention for him. So we had an intervention. It sounds crazy,
Mm-hmm.
maybe dramatic to a certain extent because it's video games, and I
Yeah.
think people think about interventions when it comes to drug addictions, right? Or a really bad habit like stealing or lying. But in his case, I think the reason why we let go for so long was it seemed almost harmless. It's one of those things that you could kind of, it flies under the radar very easily.
Yeah.
And because of the pandemic, we allowed it to kind of happen for a while because we're like, hey, it's the pandemic. No one's really doing anything.
That's fine.
It's
Alright.
fine. Everyone's playing video games. It makes sense.
Just to clarify, by we, do you mean like you and friends, or you and family?
Yeah.
or
So
both?
just to get into the intervention, it was me, family, and friends.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like I think it was a lot of us. It was like 14 of us,
Mm.
And I brought him out. I was like, "Hey, can you come outside?" And as soon as he saw everyone, he kind of knew what's up. I told him to sit down. I was like, "Hey, I kind of want to tell you why we're here, but I think you already know." And he said, "Yeah, I do." And we all expressed how we felt, but we went from it in a way where it's like, "What do you want?"
Mm.
Right? We're not here to express what we want from you. We want to hear what you want and how you feel stuck and like how you want that to change and what help you need in order for you to change, And I think us not being clinicians or a professional in that case, we had to figure out how to navigate that conversation,
Yeah.
while not stepping on his toes.
Yeah.
And I think while that may be true, we should have maybe put a little bit more pressure. I think that's where we fell short because during the conversation, he was just talking about how he doesn't want to be a nuisance to people. That's why he doesn't ask for help. But he also spoke about how he felt, I don't want to use the word betrayed, but like let down by some people along the way was another reason why he didn't want to ask for help. And when I tried to narrow down the problem to, so there's this his name's there's this guy I listen to, his name's Gabor Mate, right? And he talks about a lot of psychological things where it's addiction, traumas and stuff like that. And one of the things that he says is when people ask about addiction and why people are addicted to certain things, and he's like, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain, right? And in his case, him being addicted to the video games, it's not really the games. It's like, why is he resorting to the games? What is the pain, the conflict that's causing him to resort to escape? And I think part of it is that, my brother, he's a very charismatic guy, right? Smart dude, very versed in a lot of things, very cultured. And I think at a certain point, his belief in himself started to disassociate from who he was. And that came with a lot of like imposter syndrome, and I think that comes with expectations, right? He wanted to be at a certain point, like along in his life, and it just didn't line up. And not being able to face that reality, sometimes you escape, right? Other people use drugs and alcohol. He uses video games. And, one of the things that we brought up, and it's crazy that we're talking about video games this way. One of the things that we brought up was we told him like maybe he needs to cut out the games or reduce it.
Yeah.
And I should have known because the way he talked back was he kind of deflected, right? He was like, "Oh, it's not the games, it's me." And then we let go. We're like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe it's not the games, maybe it's just you, and you just got to figure it out." But the thing is that with video games, right, it's something that's so accessible and close to you in proximity that it's one of the few things that you could grab and put in your hand right away when you wake up. And probably one of the last things that he puts down at night before he goes to sleep. Some people have addictions to their phones, right? In his case, it was video games. And I'm at this point where I've had this conversation with him so many times, and other people have too, that I don't think we could walk on eggshells around him. And he's a special case of he doesn't know what's best for himself. you know, and I'm starting to understand that more now. So my brother, being the charismatic guy that he is, he's very good at navigating around people's conversations, right? Where he doesn't want to let go of the games, and he'll make you feel like it isn't the games, but that's exactly what it is. You know, I've it affects his life. You know, he's constantly always tired because he's every moment that he's up, he's playing games. You know, and he doesn't socialize because he feels like he's, you know, working on it by playing games. And it's, you know, where I struggle with this is that we're not young, right? My brother is like 35 now. We're not young by any means. And 4 years has passed since the pandemic. And I don't want him to blink and one day be 40, 45, 50. I'm not saying like that's even old, but I'm saying that some of the best years of your life is now, and he's not living it. You know, and I don't want him to look back and regret what's happened. You know, and that's the main thing. Again, if he were to say, playing games makes me very, very happy about the rest of my life, then I wouldn't even bat an eye. I'd be like, all right, it's cool. Like, that's what you want. That's fine. But because he's telling us things like he wants to have a family, you know, he wants to have kids, wants to get married, he wants to have a successful brand. I'm like, you're not doing that right now. You're letting your life slip through your fingers, you know? And one of the things that I personally, I don't know how to say it. It upsets me, but when people have potential, you know, everyone has potential.
Yeah.
But you can see potential in certain people. They just exude it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they let go to waste. That upsets me. Because, you know, I was talking about this. I feel like I don't really have too much of that, right? I'm the person who typically has to work for the things that I have. Meaning, you know, if I am any decent at podcasting, it's because I've been speaking and talking to people forever.
You put your hours in. You put your reps in.
Exactly, you know? And he's a guy who's always had things come easy to him.
Yeah.
And I think that does something to you where you're not resilient to pushback. You know, and I think that's what's happening to him right now. And he has to build that resiliency back up, you know, and that means to challenge himself. And I don't mean like by doing the hardest thing possible, right? I don't believe that's the way you do it. I think you'll just burn out and go back to your old ways. I think it's, you know, him grabbing the low-hanging fruit, you know what I mean? And taking step by step to like recover. You know, it sounds crazy that we're talking about video games and recovery, but
yeah, it's a real thing.
It is.
Serious.
It's actually very problematic, you know, because I think just like him, I'm sure other people who are in that situation, people just don't even bat an eye at it because they think it's harmless, but it's actually so harmful because everyone could just, you know, sweep it under the rug. And yeah, I've learned one thing with situations like that, with people that are going to be in your life and they're going to be in your life till pretty much the very end, right? Like my brother is going to be in my life. You can't expect change overnight. And for people who don't know what's best for them, right? Because they're in the wrong mindset or whatever's, you have to, in a way, like hold their hand and push them in that direction they need to go. In the very end, they still need to walk on their own, but you have to guide them. You know what I mean? Like people who have addictions, you know, their addictions, like drug addictions, like they're not going to get out of it on their own. I don't think any of those people do. They're just that at one point they're willing to change, but there needs to be someone that believes in them for them to change. You only need one person to believe in you, you know, at that moment when it finally breaks. So, you know, for me, I have to constantly remind myself to be more patient with them, you know, because, you know, for a while, because it's been going on for a long time, I would just be frustrated when he wouldn't follow through with things. You know, I'm like, all right, fuck you. He didn't go to the gym today. Like, I don't even want to ask him, you know? And I have to remind myself, like, why am I so frustrated with this guy, you know? And where is it coming from? Am I frustrated because I believe in him so much? Am I frustrated because I feel like he's leaving so much on the table that he's never going to achieve? Am I frustrated because I have to put so much time into this guy, right?
Yeah, maybe a
And I
little bit
think
of
it's
everything.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's a little bit of everything, and then if that's the case, am I truthfully here to help him then?
Mm,
Am I giving the help that he needs, right? And the help that he needs is someone who's patient and is willing to like hold his hand when he's not able to walk on his own.
yeah.
And I think right now that's what it is, right? Where it's like, hey, like I gotta knock on your door to go to the gym sometimes. I gotta, call you 20 times to do it. It seems very tedious at times, but if I really want him to get out of it,
It's
that's gonna
what's
be the way to do
necessary.
it.
Yeah.
And I think with the intervention, there's a lot of people who decided to pitch in, and help because they understand it takes a village, and I'm not gonna be able to do this on my own, nor do I think I'm the best person for it. I'm just one of them. So yeah, it's something I've been struggling with, and I can't tell you what he's been struggling with personally, because only he could know that. I just know that it's gonna be a long journey, and that I'm not a person who like, as optimistic as I say I am, right? I believe that there's a possibility, a likelihood that he can get out of it, and that's what I'm hanging on to. Like whenever I knock on his door or when I drag him out to social events,
Dude, thank you for sharing, man. That was a lot to unpack for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird because it's like I didn't know how to discern the feeling of anger, right? Because I would get annoyed, mad, angry at him.
Dude, yeah,
And I'm like, do I really care for this person? Why do I feel like this? And I think for a while I almost deemed myself as like a bad brother because I was like, oh, why would I? It's almost like I'm upset at him for something that he can't control right now, But I realized that comes with the territory of caring for someone. You only get that upset about someone that you actually care
You
for.
care about, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And, going back to like how you and your dad, it was hard for you to have conversations. I actually had, I don't even want to say like a falling out with my brother, but there was a disconnect for a long time. It's funny because people see us and they think like, oh, you guys are so close. And I have to tell them that we're not. And at this age in my late 30s, I'm trying to regain that relationship with them. And it's strange, it's funny because I'm doing this with my dad too. I'm doing this with my brother.
It's building bridges, man. I love that.
It is, man. It is. And it takes a lot, and I think that's what it is. It's like, I also have to think I need to enjoy this process while I'm working at this, right? I know I could think of it as like tedious to wake him up to the gym, but I could be so proud of the fact that he's making some kind of progress, right? It's like the little wins on the way.
It's so important to celebrate the little wins, man. All the small wins, you lead up to the big victory, man. So I feel that.
Yeah, and because you're his friend too, and he's someone meaningful to your life. Like, I think this is just a word to everyone who's listening. Please reach out to people that you care about, and I know that you're more likely going to, And a lot of people ask about him, and until I think this is another thing too. Like, you have to be very honest with the situation in order to get the help that you need. And I tried to be very honest about my brother's situation, right? Like, I'm not fluffing anything up. Like, yeah, he stays there and plays video games. He doesn't see sunlight, doesn't eat well. He gets sick from time to time because, like, he's just basically sheltered. And unless I paint that picture for people are like, oh, well, I mean, he could probably figure it out himself, so I'm not going to reach out.
I see.
But I think, now more and more people are reaching out. My friends will come up to me and be like, hey, how's Dante? Like, I've been thinking about reaching out to him. I'm like, you should. I think more so than ever, we should reach out to each other,
Yeah.
And it's weird because
he's loved, man. Yeah.
Everyone wants love, and even more so than that's like, there's nothing wrong with help. He said himself, like, I don't want to be a nuisance. And we all said it. It's like, it actually annoys us more that you're in this position because you don't ask for help. If people truthfully care about you, right, the people that you want in your life, if you want to see if they truthfully care about you, then you'll see if they'll think of you as a nuisance or not.
Yeah.
Not to say that can't be troublesome, of course, right? But viewing it as a nuisance is two different things.
Yeah.
And I think it can be troublesome, but if they do it for you, that must mean that they think it's worth it.
Very well said. Very well said, my man.
Thanks, man.
Man.
So I kind of want to go into a couple of questions with you.
All right.
This is something I actually ask everyone. So I want to ask you,
All right.
what makes you uniquely you? What makes Tony Tony?
As with everyone, I mean, objectively, the accumulation of my experiences that only, well, I have had, and the people that I have in my life, they all work, both these elements work together to create the person I am today.
Perfect.
But I think what makes me very uniquely myself is a terrible sense of humor, my crippling addiction to Smash Bros. Ultimate, my insatiable desire for coffee, or what about my gambling addiction? I'm just kidding.
I know we talked about a couple pivotal moments in your life, but what was one monumental one that's changed your life forever? And it doesn't have to be specifically in a good way, positive way. It could be something that came from something bad, tragedy, but something that's left an imprint on your life forever.
Doing my first event in Vietnam, that was so sick. For the people watching, mind you, growing up when I was a lot younger, I was not very proud to be Vietnamese. I didn't really understand why I had to be born this way. Why can't I be white? Right? Because I didn't see the value in our culture. I saw a lot of inconveniences that came from it, right? And obviously, growing up watching American TV, most people were white. In movies, most people were white. So these are people you naturally look up to, right? But then as I got older, I started really embracing my cultural identity, making an active effort to reach out and try to connect with people in Vietnam. And then so have it. About 2 years ago, I was able to actually go out and do one of the most meaningful pop-up events I've ever done in my entire life, where I got to see the tenacity and ambition and hunger and drive of the Vietnamese people and what the creative scene out there has, right? And like how people are able to work together as a community to build bridges and create amazing events and create brands and create products and objects that are just so cool, right? So this event was my first time doing something in Vietnam, and my first time as an adult visiting my homeland and getting to really build meaningful ties that with people out there I'll carry on with me for the rest of my life, right? I got to see, like, the pop-up itself is crazy. So the venue, when I got there, the venue was even done being constructed. It was a building under construction. And as we were installing our exhibition, the pop-up itself was a vintage exhibition on how that was aimed to showcase how traditional American attire has influenced design and fashion throughout the world, with pieces from designer brands and vintage American brands from yesteryear to present being put on display. So when I got there, the place wasn't even half done. The next time I visited, the build out was 90% done, and then we started putting up our installment in one of the wings, right? And I'll show you after this. Like, it was incredible. So seeing like just rocks and granite and like raw material everywhere, and in the span of like 3-4 days, everything just being put together. Nuts, man. That was mind-boggling for me. Just because coming out here, like, you'll see a pothole in the road. It's probably been there since before I was born. I'm like,
Yeah.
This is what my tax dollars are paying for. Come on, man.
Yeah.
But then out there,
and we think Asian time is slow. Fuck,
dude,
American time is slow.
When
bro.
it comes to construction, dude, and like getting things done, they got it quick. They're so efficient in their own chaotic way out in Vietnam. That was very, very world changing. It was mind boggling to me, right? But yeah, that was really big.
Dope, dude. And it sounds like you got to reconnect with your people a little bit. So.
Dude, you gotta keep in touch with them all the time. It's sick.
Nice, dude. All right, and then I have another question for you.
All right.
And that is, how do you want to be remembered when you leave this world?
As a friend. As a friend. Hopefully a good one. To some, a great one.
Gotta put that disclaimer out there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Not
you.
a shitty friend, please.
All right, Tony. Thank you, man. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me. getting to know each other a little bit better and just sharing your thought process and how you grew up, man.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Of course, dude. Can you let the audience know where they can find you?
All right, if you guys want to find me on my personal, I'm on Instagram at Tony Long Nguyen. If you want to find the projects that I'm working on, we have my showroom, Find, F-I-N-D, Hidden, H-I-D.N. And then if you want to see the cafe project that my team is working on, we have Commons, COMMONS .cafe, CAFE. And yeah, check out our website too, HIDN.jp. Yes, we have a Japanese domain. It's pretty sick.
All right, I just want to say thank you to the audience for watching all the way through. Let us know what you guys want us to talk about next time. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, live fast, eat ass.